Welcome to this conversation about ancestors, ritual, and family constellations. And today it will also be about systemic ritual because I'm talking to Daan van Kampenhout, the founder of Systemic Ritual Method, shamanic practitioner and teacher. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
So, if I may, I will just jump straight into it. And my first question to you, which I'm asking of people lately, is what is or what are ancestors?
Well, the first question, of course, is what people would think about is the bloodline. So, what is an ancestor is somebody who lived before you, who had the chance and the luck and the years of living to produce offspring that in turn produced another offspring, etc. So the ancestors, the most simple answer is those who came before us are bloodlines. So like a web almost reaching behind us. 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great grandparents, etc. But I think that's a narrow definition because, for example, if I think of my mother and the importance of her sisters in her life and how she interacts with her sisters and how they played a role in my life, directly or indirectly, you can't say that the ancestors are only those who are in the direct bloodline. It's really, the ancestor field is much larger. It includes, um, uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces. The field is much more populated than just the direct bloodline. Then there is, maybe you could say, there's also not just the ancestors that somehow contributed to who we are physically, but we have the ancestors of our culture. We have the ancestors of, the mythology. We have the ancestors of the religious or spiritual practices that we may have grown up in or were introduced to. So ancestors, I would say, is the ancestor field is all that knowledge, all that information, all that energy of those who lived before us, who shaped us, who made us who we are, not just physically, also emotionally, spiritually, socially, etc.
Thank you. And just to ask as well, in the way how you see ancestors, um, are they are they people of the past? Are they staying in the past, or are they also in the present? And is there such a thing as a well ancestors and unwell ancestors, and whether that matters for?
That's two very different questions. So what you're asking are two very different questions. So I'm going to what I see as one of these questions. Are the ancestors something in the past, or do they live in the past, exist in the past, or no longer exist because they are in the past, or are they here and now? I think the answer is both. Obviously, they lived before us. Obviously, we know maybe 1, 2, 3 generations, but then we don't know their names usually. We don't know how they lived. That's the past, obviously. Still, their energy, their imprints, the effects of their deeds, both individually and collectively, may have a strong effect on how we live. So they are definitely in the here and now, indirectly, But when we do ritual, when we pray, when we dream, we can somehow transcend this division between past and now, and we can open that up and we meet in a place that's in between the past and the here and now, the space of ritual. So they are in the past, obviously, but through ritual, through prayer, through trance, through dreams, we can, we no longer need that division between now and past, and we can meet with them. And then I said, your question was actually 2 questions. I don't remember what would have been the second.
I mentioned the presence of the well ancestors and the unwell ancestors, and how that could influence somebody's life.
Oh, yeah. I think this is, it's a very relevant question, but for a different reason than you may ask it. I sometimes get people and they say like, oh, my ancestors did terrible things. It's not a safe place for me, the ancestor field. I understand that. I completely understand that. At the same time, it's a trap to think like that on some level. Because, for example, I may be in a really bad mood, right? And my partner, he gets it. And I'm annoyed, I'm complaining, I'm whining, me, and it's not a nice atmosphere in the house. So for him, I'm really not the best person to be around at that time. But maybe my mother calls me or a friend and they say, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm okay. Yeah, sure, I'm good. How are you?" And I'm like optimistic and friendly. And that's me just in the same like 5 minutes time frame. And I think it's the same about ancestors. Like who is successful or balanced in all areas of their life? Nobody. But most people luckily have some parts in their life where they are, feel good about themselves and can be creative and have a meaningful existence for themselves and others. And we all have parts of our lives where we feel incomplete and suffering and traumatized and whatever. So I don't like the division between the whole ancestors and the broken ancestors, although it makes sense from a certain point of view. But I like to see it more like, every ancestor has elements of wholeness and has elements of brokenness. And depending on the ritual, depending on our prayer, depending on our focus, we work with either their brokenness and try to provide something that might make them more whole, or we call their wholeness so that it might give something to us or other ancestors. So I don't like to see ancestors as either broken or whole. I'd like to see every ancestor as a complete human being, which means some of their being is functional and complete, and some of their being is dysfunctional and incomplete. Like we ourselves, like every living human being. They're no different than we.
Thank you. That makes me think of something that I think you mentioned in one of the rituals about the ancestors going into the north, and the further back they are behind us, the further in the north they are, and the more healed and the more transcendent maybe they become. They turn more into a resourceful guide and support. And I've read somewhere else that the more broken, more unwell ancestors are sort of the closer they are to us, the more there is of their human side still there, of their human stories and pain still there. And then the further back you go, the more they are in the resourceful place for us.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned the North, that would presume that people understand something about the wheel as I have gotten to know and develop it. So let's take out the word North and, for example, replace it with the light. Because many cultures, and especially many Western people in more New Age type of thinking, modern spirituality, they have ideas about light. So the ancestor or the person who dies somehow returns to a source of light. And we can imagine that somebody who died very recently and may not even be fully aware that they died because maybe it was an accident or they were drugged in a hospital or something, that they don't just slide easily into that light because they're either not aware that they have to go anywhere or they are longing to their physical existence and in a way reaching out to the physicality which they can't really do anymore. So they are closer to the border, to the physical world. And ideally, I think many cultures and religions and spiritual systems say that people after that death, the ideal way is that they slowly go into this source of light, returning into some kind of source. And in order to do that, they have to disidentify with the physical world and let go. So, in that sense, yes, there is a path that ancestors could travel after their physical death from, let's say, the physical world to being absorbed back into a source of creation. And if they're very close to this physical world still, they might still need help. They might still be traumatized or very identified with who they were in their physical existence. But when they start to travel a little bit and come closer to that light, there might be some kind of, if you speak about the ancestors as resources, that's a very ideal zone for us because they might still hear our voices. But when they respond, it's not out of trauma, but it's out of connection that they still might have to their descendants. So, yes, there is something in this model of like a zone or a place where the ancestors can be, where they are more and more free, more and more um, permeable for the source of creation, but still can hear and respond to their descendants.
Thank you. I'm wondering what role ancestors play in the work that you do, the way you work.
Well, when I started to get to know family constellations, that's the late 90s, last century, ancestors as such were not part of the constellation language. You wouldn't see them represented as a group or as a resource at all. Um, but I came from a shamanic background where ancestors are a given and one of the potential resources that are often invited. In so many cultures, the ancestors are present in people's hearts and minds. Go to a Thai restaurant and you will see a little ancestor altar somewhere. It's in so many cultures. So I was used to the presence of ancestors in a variety of ways. And when I got to know family constellations, I really missed that because I could see in most family constellations, the family system is put up like a father, a mother, a child, a grandmother. And obviously the system needs help because they're in trouble. But there's not enough energy or resources within this nuclear family or this system. And I was like almost surprised, like why are they not surrounded by the ancestors who can add their prayer and their blessing to these people who are their descendants? But that was not a common thought at all at that time. And so I started introducing that in my correspondence and my communications with Bert Hellinger. So I was used to the presence of ancestors in a variety of ways. In the cultures where I'd been a guest with my teachers in their prayers. In the Jewish tradition, the ancestors play an important role. Mm-hmm. So they were there, but not in the constellation work. And I very soon started to miss that because when a system needs support, they need energy, they need more, soul energy, they need more wisdom, they need more stamina, they need more perseverance, they need more whatever. The ancestors are behind everybody. They went through every human experience, every basic human experience of, loving, hating, hope, disillusionment. They know it all because they're human beings, right? So when we find a way to activate or invite the ancestor field around a family constellation, and through our prayer and our focus, make a very clear request, like, dear ancestors, you who went through all your human experiences, you know about hope, you know about death, you know about life, you know about this, you know about that. Look at your descendants who don't know how to fix this or this. Do you, dear ancestors, have a little bit of wisdom to share with them? It's a very open but precise request. And so when you can formulate the sentences or the prayers so that the ancestors know why they are invited and what is their possible task, they can make up their mind. Like, yes, I do have something. I have a smile, I have a little gift, I have an energy, a blessing for my descendants. Then the system that is represented immediately gets more energy and feels supported. So that's how I started, with very simply a family constellation with ancestors surrounding it. But later, as I developed systemic ritual, it became much more, I would say, much more choreographies almost and patterns how to do that. But it started very, very simple. You know, the family needs a blessing, they need strength. The ancestors have that when we know how to invite them in the right way. So it started very simple, very basic.
Thank you. You mentioned prayer several times now. Can you say a little bit more about the role of prayer in the work with ancestors or in relationship with ancestors? How can it be used, especially for people from a variety of backgrounds, if it's a, say, a non-religious background?
Yeah, I think the word prayer is a very tragic word because so many people have immediate like bad associations, like very dry repetition of words that feel archaic in a meaningless way. And surely that's how I got to know prayer too when I was younger. But when I was lucky enough to be able to spend time with my teachers, and I saw how their prayer was improvised poetry, basically, always came out of the here and now, and that their prayer was never a formula that was old and dry and stale, but was a way to communicate. The prayer was a path that spirit can walk towards us. Prayer is a bridge that bridges worlds. So I got to understand that prayer is not a dry old thing at all, that prayer is reinvented every time. That prayer is living poetry, is creating a bridge between the worlds. It's you know, a lot has been said and written about this, but I think it's poetry that bridges the world. And poetry not in, you know, maybe even poetry is a problematic word. Prayer has an immediate reward. When you have learned how to pray, and you don't learn that easily, you need examples, you need role models who embody that. But when a prayer is a prayer that works, it has an immediate calming effect on the nervous system of the person who prays. It immediately gives the sense of, I'm embedded in something larger. You know, my prayer, uh, God is a problematic word and I very rarely use it. But if you use the concept of God, my prayer puts the one I pray for in the hand of God. You know, but as I do that, I must see and visualize the hand of God because that's where I'm putting that person. And of course, as I put that person there, it's almost as if I walk hand in hand with that person. So I also end up in that hand of God. You know, it has an immediate blessing and effect. We can speak for days about what prayer is, but should be enough to start.
So if I've never done prayer before, or as you say, you know, I've been introduced to it in that a bit rigid way, what do I do? How do I learn? Where do I begin to learn about it, or how to do it in the right way so that it brings me this healing and relaxation?
How long is this course going to be? I mean, it's like one of my teachers said, it takes 9 years to learn how to pray. You know, like if that's true or not is not important, but you can't just do that. You know, like anything, play the violin. How do you start playing the violin? How are you ever going to answer that question? Um, it's too big a question. It's almost pretentious to give an answer because prayer needs to come, you know, okay, I'll close my eyes. Oh, Spirit, powers that look kindly at us, powers that look kindly at me, powers that look kindly at my friend here, at Aleksandra. She has this question, spirit people, all of you who are in this other world, who surround us, who are here right now. She wants to know what prayer is. Powers that look kindly at her, open her mind, open her heart, open her soul, that knowledge comes to her in a way that helps her to take a step forwards to the people that she is teaching. Spirit, this is what I'm asking. Well, that's a prayer. Can't explain it, and just do it, right?
I feel it.
I feel it.
Thank you.
Good.
Well,
No,
my
but that's it, right? It's so simple.
yeah.
And and of course the prayer, when you learn it, it follows certain paths, it follows certain structures, and those you can learn and start to recognize. But it's easy pretentious to speak about it.
Why would anyone want to work with their ancestors or want to be in touch, in connection, in relationship with their ancestors?
It's such a funny question, because it you could hear that question in such a way as if you can not be in touch with them, which is impossible, because here you are, you have a body, you have a soul, you have a mind, you have a way of thinking, you have a way of responding to the world. That's the ancestors, that comes from the ancestors. So we are anyway all the time in connection with them. We're anyway all the time influenced by them. So the question is more like, it's not even a question. I think most of us in the Western world have never thought that we are influenced that strongly by them. And when you start to understand that, it becomes very logical to be involved with them, because then you can use what is behind you, not abuse, but use that in a very good way. It's like the stream of life comes from them. And when you know that this is a stream coming from somewhere, going somewhere, it's like you are the surfer on that stream. So, yeah, I wouldn't see a reason not to.
You've mentioned that you started working with constellations and then started bringing the ancestors into the constellations. And now the method that you have, that you do, is called systemic ritual. How did this transition happen?
Um, I was studying shamanism for many years before I got to know the constellations, right? About 20 years. And then I got to know family constellations also about 20 years ago. I started early, in my late teens. So I knew something of shamanism. I was a student of shamanism. And constellations was then 20 years ago something very different than it is now, because it has been evolving and changing. It went very gradual. I just understood some elements of family constellation and I applied them. I understood some elements of shamanism and I used them and applied them. And it seemed very fast, even from a theoretical point of view, that it would be a win-win situation to use elements of both. One good element of classic family constellation is that there is a direct communication. Mother, I now withdraw. Or father, I give it back to you. It is yours to carry and not mine. These are very direct sentences, very archaic and effective sentences. In classic shamanism, you can't speak like that to the people around you. That's way too direct. Plus, the focus is never on the I, the focus is much more on the we. So that's a gift from family constellation. In shamanism, there is a lot of know-how how to invite the circle, how to be in the presence of ancestors, with the ancestors as a strengthening force. That's completely lacking in classic constellation. So, I saw many good parts of shamanic ritual. I saw some very nice parts of family constellation that seemed to make, family constellation felt incomplete to me. Shamanism felt incomplete to me at that moment in time. And it was like, if I combine some elements of both, something good comes out of that. But it wasn't necessarily that conscious or that planned or that strategic. It was really more like, I've been learning a way of prayer, I've been learning a way of working, and then I apply an element of constellation into that. And looking back, it seems like a clear path, but actually, it was much more something that organically grew out of prayer without any clear idea where that would end up. Actually.
Thank you. Um, so I'm wondering if it's possible that you share a personal story of how ancestral work or ritual work, shamanic work, constellation work has changed something for you.
Well, many of us don't know our ancestors because we've never learned to think about the ancestors as a living presence. And in a Western monotheistic culture, Jewish, Christian, um, homosexuality is very taboo. Anything that's feminine is anyway valued as less than masculine. So misogyny and the whole crap is part of like the monotheistic cultures. And then especially if a man isn't completely butch and like straight and alpha, it's like you are immediately suspect. And there's this huge denial of a spectrum of flow between what is considered masculine and feminine. So growing up as a boy that you would call homosexual, I felt deeply troubled about who I was because the culture denied my existence to a certain extent. And so what an interesting intervention to put up a circle of people around me. Just imagine this, right? The culture tells you and the religion tells you you don't really exist. We can tolerate you at most. You can be gay, but you can't live like a gay man, right? This kind of bullshit. So if I put up, let's say, 30 people around me, and I say, you are my lesbian ancestors, you are my gay ancestors, you are my bisexual ancestors, you are my uncles, my aunts, and you exist, and you existed in every generation. You've always been there, no matter if they gave you a place or not. You are part of where I come from. And I stand in front of you, and I'm part of you. And you will be present in the next generations. That's huge. That's huge. So this is, I work in gay communities, lesbian communities, trans communities, and do these ancestor rituals. It's life-changing for people. I get letters after that, like I found the courage to change my job. Finally, I don't hate myself anymore. Finally, I know I exist. So the ancestors, we always think we're alone. It's one of the biggest illusions. Many spiritualities and religions say that we are united in something larger. But of course, you have to be this, you can't be this, da 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 da. Okay, good. But what if that's suddenly, for the first time in your life, a reality through ancestor work, that who you are is not a mistake of God, it's just like how human people have always been. And some have always been, and some of them are behind you and around you. You just have to remember that. It changes the ground on which you walk.
Thank you. It really touches me. When you said just imagine this, I could really feel it in the whole of my body and the whole of my being. It I have I have goosebumps on my skin.
If you are a shy person, very introvert, and it's very difficult for you to make yourself visible in some way, and people judge you, and all the magazines say an article about how to be more extrovert, how to blah blah blah, blah. And it's this constant denial of who you are on some level, and just like put up like 10 or 15 stones around you and say, every stone, you are one of my shy ancestors, and I stand with you in the circle. It's very, very, it can be so simple. And the ancestors, we have so many of them. And they're always there because we are here. We are the entry point to that whole field. It's like our prayer whoop, redirects the energy and the door opens. So this is not just about being gay or being shy, but when you start to understand that every human experience is present in the ancestor field, and that there are ancestors who knew this human experience, and that some suffered from it, and others got strength from it. That some may have been afraid of it, but others may have been proud of it. It's the complete human experience is there. So then the ancestor field becomes, in a very interesting way, a field of unlimited support. Of course, the ancestors didn't know computers, they didn't know cars, but they did know what it felt like to be left behind. They did know what it felt like to be high one day and proud and like disillusioned the next. The human experience is part of every human. So the ancestor field is when you know how to access it and work with it. It's just a source of unlimited strength and a mirror for our darkest and brightest selves. So shame falls away at some point because there's always somebody out there in the ancestor field who did it like you and much worse, or so no reason to be ashamed. You say, ancestors, imagine this. There's something in your soul you're really ashamed about. And you can tell nobody. You can't even tell yourself about it. And then if you put up like some stones or some representations and you say, you are the ancestors who carried that shame in their lifetime. But you are the ancestors who know how to transcend that. So you are the ancestors who do not only know the shame that I have in my life at this point, but you have managed in your life to somehow transcend that into a source of strength. Wonderful. I'm sure they have been there. Why would they not be there in the thousands and thousands of people behind us in the ancestor field?
So, just one last question. Is there anything else you would like to bring into this space today before we close?
No.
Okay,
No.
perfect. Thank you.